13 men walked out of the mine. Nobody had come for them. The galleries above them had been walled shut with packed earth and stone to smother a fire and not to reach the missing. They came up on their own feet barefoot, and nobody was carrying them. One of the 13 was a hewer named Charles Prouvost, who had gone down on the morning of the explosion with his 15-year-old son. He had found the boy alive by chance in roughly 110 kilometers of unlit workings. A fire had been burning behind 7 dams of packed earth since the Wednesday night, and the coal on the other side of it was still being cut. Engineers had built the dams and judged that they would be enough. They reached a shaft by themselves, and the men who met them at the top were miners coming off an ordinary shift. The mine was cutting coal again alongside the district it had walled shut. By the official count, 1,099 men did not come up at all. Nobody counted the men who were still alive. They had been counted on the way in. By the departmental archives figure, 1,664 men and boys went down the 3 shafts that morning. Other accounts give 1,425, and another gives about 1,800. Whichever of those is right, it is the last count anybody made of them. Charles Prouvost stepped into a cage at pit 2 a little before 6, and his son stepped in beside him. Anselm was 15, and he worked below ground as a pit boy. His father was 40, 44 in one account, and he cut coal at the face, which made him, in the trade's own word, a hewer. The pits belonged to the Compagnie de mines de Courrières, and they stood about 2 kilometers east of Lens in the coalfield of the Pas-de-Calais. Pit 2 at Billy-Montigny, Pit 3 at Méricourt, Pit 4 at Sallaumines. The commune of Courrières lost nobody. The disaster carries the company's name and not the name of a village that suffered it. Among the men in those cages were boys of 13 and 14. Children of that age are recorded among the dead. The youngest of the 13 who would walk out was 14, 13 in one account, and the next youngest was Anselm. They went down into ground that had never once given up the gas that kills miners. No fire damp had ever been detected in those pits. Not a trace of it in the whole working life of the concession. The company held a safety distinction awarded at the Universal Exposition of 1900. Fire damp, the gas that seeps out of coal and fires when it meets a flame, was the one danger every man in that cage had been taught to fear, and the one danger these 3 pits had never produced. What Charles Prouvost could not have known, walking away from the shaft bottom, was that gas was not the thing that was coming for him. Coal dust is not a byproduct of cutting coal. It is coal, ground fine by picks and machines and the passage of tubs, lying on the floor and the ledges and the timbers of every roadway. A man walks down in a working pit. Left where it lies, it does nothing at all. Lifted into the air in enough quantity and given a flame, it burns, and the burning lifts the dust off the next stretch of roadway, and hands that aflame too. An explosion of that kind carries its own fuel and lays it down ahead of itself as it travels. It does not need gas. It needs dust, air, and something to start it. Safety lamps had been compulsory in French mines since 1905. They were not in use in these pits, and a man working the face carried an open flame. That was not carelessness, and it should not be heard as carelessness. A safety lamp is a lamp built against gas. Its flame sits inside a gauze that keeps it below the temperature at which fire damp will take. In a pit that had never registered fire damp, it answered a danger nobody underground there had ever met, and it answered it by giving a man less light to cut by. Light is the thing a hewer at the face needs most. Engineers at the time reached the obvious conclusion, and it was a reasonable one. An open flame had met fire damp, the gas had fired, and the blast of it had lifted the dust and set that alight in turn. A coup de grisou, a fire-damp blast, is what the retellings still call it, and it does explain the one thing the dust cannot explain on its own: where the flame came from. There was already a fire underneath him, and it had been burning for 3 days. It was in the Sainte-Cécile seam at Pit 3. The company had built 7 dams of packed earth and stone across the roadways to starve it of air. Behind those dams, it went on burning. In front of them, the coal went on being cut, and men went on being sent down to cut it. Pierre Simon, a delegate the men called Riek, had asked in February that men stop being sent down Pit 3. He was overruled. He was overruled on a reason, and the reason was the dams. 7 of them, and the last of them finished in masonry the day before the explosion. Nobody had gone looking for that fire in the first place. A man found it 3 nights earlier doing something ordinary. He was a stableman, and he was taking a horse back to the stalls on the night of the 7th of March when he came on the seam alight. 3 days later, at 6:30 or 6:45 on the morning of Saturday the 10th of March, the dust went up. It crossed roughly 110 kilometres of galleries in a few minutes. That is the figure the departmental archives publish, and it is worth holding still for a moment, because it is the whole event, not a blast in a chamber. A flame front travelling the roadways of a coalfield faster than a man standing in one could turn round. It went through 3 separate pits. It went through the districts where the shift was already at the face, and the districts where the shift was still walking to it, and the roadways in between where a man's only warning would have been the air moving in the wrong direction. What it did not consume, it filled, because the flame leaves behind it a gas that will not carry a lamp and will not carry a lung, and the miners had a word for that as well: after damp. At the surface, cages were thrown more than 10 metres clear of the shaft tops. 3 pits were wrecked in those same few minutes: Pit 2 at Billy-Montigny, Pit 3 at Méricourt, Pit 4 at Sallaumines. Outside the gates, wooden barriers went up, and the photographs taken there over the following days show them holding back crowds of women a few metres short of the pit mouths. About 550 to 576 men reached the surface that day. That was the last good news the Coalfield had for 3 weeks. Now, do the subtraction, because it turns on a number nobody agrees on. If 1,664 went down, then about 1,100 did not come up. If it was 1,425, it is about 850. The official toll is 1,099, which fits the first of those counts and not the second. It also excludes at least 16 rescuers who died. Estimates at the time ran nearer 1,200, and one postcard in the departmental archive is captioned flatly 1,200 victims. Pierre Simon went down. He is credited with bringing 17 men out against instruction. Underground, the men who were still alive went where the air was, which is not the same as going where the way out was. 2 parties formed in the Josephine and Adélaïde workings, between the levels at 231 and 326 metres. 10 men in one, 11 in the other. A shaft is the only way up out of a coal mine, and there were 3 of them in that concession, and every roadway that led to one had just been swept end to end. The men in those 2 parties had lamps until the oil in them went. After that, they had nothing to see by, in workings laid out over roughly 110 kilometres, by men who had been told all their working lives that the danger down there was a gas this ground had never held. Charles Provost was somewhere in that maze, and so was his son, and neither of them knew where the other was. On the 11th, the deeper searches were suspended. On the night of the 11th and 12th of March, galleries were walled off with packed earth and stone, and the ventilation of Pit 3 was reversed. It was done on the authority of Frédéric Delafont, the state's own Inspector General of Mines. The walling was done to smother the fire and to preserve the seam and not to reach the missing. The air was reversed to let the rescuers move forward. The record of it says, in as many words, that the measure risked asphyxiating any survivors. On the 12th, about 25 rescuers arrived from Herne and Gelsenkirchen with oxygen-breathing apparatus that no French company owned. They were photographed at the Pithead in leather harness and full-face masks, standing among miners in cloth caps holding open-flame lamps. And it is here that the obvious explanation starts to give way. No fire damp had ever been detected in those pits. Not in the years before the explosion, and not in what the inquiry could establish afterwards. The reading generally accepted today is that the dust fired on its own, with no gas involved at all, which leaves the flame, and leaves it without an owner. By the morning of the 12th, there was a wall of packed earth between the 2 parties and the rest of the mine.
Behind that wall, men were still walking. There is no light underground that a mine does not bring in with it. When the oil went, what was left was the kind of dark in which a man learns a roadway with his hands. The mine gave them nothing back except the sounds it makes anyway. Water off a wall, timber taking weight, their own breathing at the mouth of a gallery. They ate what the workings held, and the accounts differ on the order. The provisions found on the bodies of men who had not survived, carrots and oats out of the stable, bark stripped off the timbering, the canvas of their own bags. And the horse. His name was Écuyer, and he belonged to Honoré Couplet, who worked with him. Couplet killed him with a pick in total darkness to feed the men who were with him. The account that carries the detail says that in the dark the killing turned into a massacre. They drank what they could find, water seeping out of the walls, then dirty water, then their own urine. 8 of them died down there. The one account that reaches us of those 20 days has 5 of the Josephine 10 and 3 of the Adelaide 11 dying in the days that followed. They were asphyxiated, and the 3 were reaching for a boette, a cross gallery cut through stone, when they went. 2 seams, 2 parties. 8 men who came through the explosion and did not come through the 20 days. They did not die in the explosion. They died in the days after it, going up. Nothing in the record fixes which days, and that is the second time in this story that the same thing is missing. Somewhere in the same workings, Charles Provost found his son alive. The record says by chance, and it says nothing else about how. Roughly 110 kilometers of roadway, between about 231 and 340 meters below a field in the Pas-de-Calais, and no light in any of it. Early on the morning of the 30th of March, 13 men reached the landing at Pit 2 on their own feet. Nobody was carrying them. Nobody had been sent for them. The men who met them were miners coming off an ordinary shift in the Mathilde and Julie veins, in a mine that had gone back to cutting coal alongside the district it had walled shut. They had been under that field for 20 days, and 2 of them were boys, and one of the boys was Anselme Provost. That is the whole of what is known from inside. Against it stands what the record holds about the rest. No note, no marking, no tally written underground by anybody has survived. In 110 kilometers of workings, across 20 days, not one line. By the 1st of April, 194 bodies had been brought up, against an official toll of 1,099. The inquiry said Wyatt could not fix the cause. Its sentence deserves to be heard as it was written, quote, "This is what generally happens in catastrophes where all the witnesses to the accident are gone. So weigh what the 20 days established and weigh it carefully. 14 men were alive in exactly the workings that had been closed. 8 more died in those workings after the explosion rather than in it. What no document reached in this research records is whether anybody above ground knew it on the night the walls went up or on any night after. And what the 14 said to each other across 20 days in the dark is written down nowhere." One more of them came up. On the 4th of April, 5 days after the 13, rescuers found Auguste Berton at the landing 331 meters down at Pit 4. He had been alone for roughly 25 days. He had drunk from the boettes, eaten mouldy bread, found horse meat too hardened to eat, and taken clothing off dead men to keep warm. Recovery work ended 4 days later, on the 8th. The 13 had been taken to a milk dispensary, turned into an infirmary, and photographed there in blankets while a doctor worked along the row. 696 injured, 562 widows, 1,133 orphans. Those are the figures the record carries, and they belong to the official toll, not to a count anybody took at a pit head. None of what happened above ground waited for the 13. The Coalfield had already answered 17 days before they walked out. On the 13th of March, 15,000 people followed the first funerals through an unseasonal snowstorm. The strike began that evening. By the 19th, between 46 and 50,000 men were out, split between Émile Basly's union and Benoît Broutchou's. Georges Clemenceau went to Laon on the 18th. By the middle of April there was rioting, and photographs from the pit gates show mounted gendarmes pushing their horses into crowds of women. The order of those dates matters, and it is not the order the story is usually told in. The Coalfield went out on the 13th. The 13 came up on the 30th. Every one of those 17 days of funerals and marches and soldiers happened while Charles Prouvost and his son were still under the field in the dark, looking for a shaft. The strike was not the answer to their coming up. It was already running when they did. Which returns the question to the flame, because a dust explosion needs a shock, and the ground here is contested. The Heritage Service of the Pas-de-Calais reports the expert suspicion that the dust was raised and fired by primed cartridges set off by a shock in the Le Couve roadway, where a cutting machine was throwing heavy dust. It is a reading that fits a pit with no gas in it, and it takes the flame out of the argument altogether. The dust needed no fire damp, only a shock. What it does not supply is the shock. Nobody has named it, and nobody is now in a position to, because the men standing in that roadway did not come out. There is a second charge, and it is older than the Heritage Service's suspicion. Émile Basly told a mass meeting that a council of state and company engineers had decided, 3 days in, that there were no longer any living. That is a charge made from a platform, and no document behind it has been produced. In the same breath, the finding against it. The court at Béthune examined the conduct of the rescue in July and found no fault. And more recent studies treat the deliberate delay claim as exaggerated. 2 courts looked at what had been done in that mine, and neither of them found anybody at fault. The first sat at Béthune in July 1906 and found no fault in the rescue.
The second sat at Arras in May 1907 and returned a non-lieu, a ruling that there was no case to answer. What changed was everything around them. The weekly rest law passed on the 13th of July 1906. A Ministry of Labour was created that October. A decree the next year required central rescue stations. The 8-hour day reached the mines in July 1914, by which time between 20 and 30,000 troops had been into the Coalfield, said to be the largest such deployment in metropolitan France since 1871. Pierre Simon had asked that men stop being sent down Pit 3 and been overruled. Afterwards, the state wrote a good deal of his argument into law. Something else came out of that mine and stayed. The word the Coalfield used for a man who came up alive, rescapé, went out of the local patois into standard French, and it is the ordinary French word for a survivor now. The deepest thing anybody knows about Charles Prouvost reaches us through his grandson Marcel on a broadcast in 1978. What the family remembered him saying to his wife when he took her hand was, "J'ai bien braillé pour ti, in Picard, I cried hard for you." It is not a document, it is the closest thing that survives. The reading that carries the most weight today is the least dramatic one. The blast and the afterdamp killed almost everybody within minutes. The fire threatened the whole field, and walling the galleries was defensible fire control taken on the best information anybody had. Both courts found that way. It explains the scale and the speed. It does not explain the 14, and it does not explain the 8. It is not proven, and nothing published settles it. The answer, if it is anywhere, is in the day-by-day recovery registers, and the engineers' minutes in the archives read against the death certificates. The shafts are filled, and the coalfield is ground people walk across. The head frame over the pit they walked out of came down in 1949 and was raised again over another shaft at Harness. Recovery ran to the 8th of April, and by the 1st, 194 bodies were up against an official toll of 1,099. Nobody wrote anything down in those galleries, no note, no marking, no tally. So, of the men who did not come out, it cannot be said which of them died in the first minutes and which were still alive on the night the walls went up.